Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're looking at language learning materials.
Specifically course books.
Yeah, those textbooks we all know and,
Love.
well, maybe not love, but we're going to unpack how they approach this idea of communicative competence.
The thing is,
Yeah,
what a lot of course books focus on, it might not be the most effective way to learn a language.
really. For like actually using it in the real world.
Exactly. And it's interesting because our source material actually breaks down communicative competence into 5 key pillars.
5 pillars, huh? Sounds pretty,
Architectural.
yeah, a little. What are we building with these pillars, metaphorically?
Well, think of them as the foundation for good communication in any language. And those 5 pillars are accuracy, fluency, appropriacy, clarity, and effectiveness.
Okay, so it's already sounding like more than just memorizing grammar rules.
Absolutely.
But let's break it down. Accuracy, that's got to be the classic. Like,
Yeah. Getting it right.
exactly. The grammar, the pronunciation.
Right, but the source makes a really interesting point
Hmm.
that a lot of course books, they kind of get stuck on accuracy, like at the expense of those other pillars.
Oh, so it's not enough to just be like perfect in those little practice exercises?
Not necessarily, no, because that doesn't always translate into real conversations.
It's like learning to dance perfectly in a studio, but then you get to an actual party and you're like,
Frozen.
totally. So where does fluency fit into all this? I always thought it was just about like speaking fast.
Oh, that's a common one. But actually, fluency is more about getting your message across smoothly so the listener is comfortable.
Okay, yeah. It's not just about speed. It's like,
It's like when you hear a really engaging speaker.
right.
They might not be perfectly grammatically correct every second, but they know how to use pauses, emphasis.
To keep you hooked.
Exactly. That's fluency in action.
Wow. Okay, that's a good way to put it. So what about this appropriacy thing? Does that mean I got to be super formal all the time?
No, not at all. Appropriacy means you're choosing language that fits the situation, and who you're talking to.
Oh, so like using slang with your buddies versus being all proper in a job interview.
Exactly. Or like if you're traveling to another country.
Yeah, you got to know what's cool and what's not.
Right. There are cultural things too.
I've definitely seen people put their foot in their mouth with that one. All right, so we've got accuracy, fluency, and being appropriate.
Appropriacy.
Right. Now, what about clarity?
Clarity is simply making sure that people can understand you. Clear pronunciation, sentences that make sense.
No confusing jargon.
Exactly. It's like when you write a good email, you want it to be...
Straight to the point.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got accuracy, fluency, we've got appropriacy, clarity. That leaves effectiveness, which sounds a
Important.
little bit, yeah. What's that all about?
So effectiveness is all about using language to actually get things done.
Oh, interesting.
Whether you're persuading someone, explaining something complicated, or just connecting with another person, it's choosing the right tool for the job.
Like you wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a screw.
Perfect analogy. And language is the same way.
You got to have the right words for the right moment.
Yes. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
The source argues that, yeah, most language learners would agree these 5 pillars are important, but a lot of traditional course books, they don't really reflect that.
Wait, so all those grammar drills and like fill in the blanks, they might not actually be the best way to learn.
Well, that's what the source is suggesting.
Okay, I got to know more. How are these course books falling short?
Well, like we said, they put a lot of emphasis on accuracy.
Getting the grammar right.
Yeah, which I guess is important, but they sometimes forget about those other 4 pillars, the ones that are crucial in real life.
So it's like learning all the parts of a bicycle, but never actually... Yeah. You might know all the names of the gears and the brakes, but could you navigate through traffic?
Exactly. And there's another issue that the source points out, especially when it comes to learning English.
Ooh, let me guess. The whole native speaker thing? Like we all have to sound like we're on the BBC?
You got it. The source argues against imposing native speaker norms,
Which makes sense. I mean,
especially when you think about how many people speak English all over the world.
and with so many different accents and ways of speaking.
Exactly. So this focus on standardized English, it can actually be really discouraging for learners.
Yeah, it's like saying there's only one right way to make pasta when people all over the world have their own delicious versions.
I like that.
So if those traditional course books aren't cutting it,
What are the alternatives?
yeah, give me the good stuff.
Well, the source offers some really exciting alternative approaches, and we'll dive into those after a quick break. So before the break, we were talking about how some of those traditional course books might not be doing language learners any favors.
Yeah, it was kind of eye-opening to realize that all those grammar drills might not be the magic solution I thought they were.
Right. But there are other ways to approach language learning.
And I'm really curious about those alternative approaches you mentioned,
Well, one of the big things the source talks about is moving away from this one-size-fits-all idea.
especially when it comes to English, right?
Exactly. The source argues that materials should embrace all the different ways English is spoken around the world.
So not just focusing on one standard English.
Right, because there are so many accents and dialects out there.
It always seems strange to me that there was only supposed to be one correct way to speak, you know?
I know what you mean. It's like saying there's only one right way to play jazz music.
Yeah. You wouldn't say bebop is the only way to play jazz,
Yeah,
right? Each style has its own, like, flavor.
exactly. And language is the same way. By embracing this diversity, we can make language learning more inclusive and authentic.
I love that. So speaking of authenticity, our source also dives into the challenges of how traditional approaches deal with those four core language skills.
Reading, listening, speaking, and writing.
Right. And it sounds like the source identifies a common problem with how they're usually taught
Yeah, the tendency to focus on the product.
instead of the process.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow. What does that actually mean in language learning?
Well, think about those reading comprehension exercises. You read a passage and then...
You answer a bunch of questions.
Right, it's all about proving you understood the text.
But that's not really how we read in real life, is it?
Not always. I mean, yeah, sometimes we need to extract specific information, but
But there's so much more going on in our heads when we read.
absolutely. We're making predictions, connecting ideas, even arguing with the author in our minds.
It's like you're focused on getting to the destination, but you're not paying attention to the scenery along the way.
That's a great way to put it. And all those mental processes are a crucial part of reading comprehension.
So how do we design materials that support that more holistic view of reading?
Well, the source suggests incorporating activities where learners think about their own reading process, articulate their thoughts and feelings as they read, and connect the text to their own lives.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about making reading an active experience, not just a passive one.
Exactly. And it's the same with listening comprehension.
So instead of just listen and repeat, we should be encouraging learners to be more active listeners.
Exactly, because in real life, we're not just trying to catch every single word. We're filtering information, using context to figure out what the speaker means, and sometimes even filling in the gaps when we miss something.
It's like trying to follow a conversation in a noisy cafe. You got to tune out the distractions and focus on the main message.
Exactly, and language learning materials can help prepare learners for that.
By simulating those kinds of real-world listening environments.
Exactly. Now, you might be thinking, this process-oriented approach, does it work for speaking and writing too?
Yeah, those are considered productive skills. It seems like the end product is kind of the whole point.
You're right. But the source argues that the process is still just as important, because traditional materials often give learners predetermined phrases and structures.
Oh, like those role-playing activities where you have to use specific vocabulary.
Right. And while those can be helpful, they don't always capture the spontaneity of real conversation.
Because in real life, you don't have a script. You have to improvise, adapt to the situation.
Exactly. And that involves all sorts of cognitive skills. It's a much more dynamic process than just producing grammatically correct sentences.
So it sounds like we need to shift the focus from accuracy to fluency, from controlled exercises to authentic communication.
From product to process.
But that feels like a huge shift.
It is a big change, and the source recognizes that. But there are practical steps we can take to start moving in the right direction.
Okay, so we've talked about the need for change, but I'm wondering how we actually make it happen. I mean, it's one thing to talk about new ideas, but actually putting them into practice? That seems tricky.
Oh, yeah, the source acknowledges that. There are some big hurdles.
Like what?
Well, there's the influence of standardized tests.
Which usually care more about grammar than communication, right?
Exactly. And then there's the fact that a lot of schools rely heavily on traditional textbooks.
Which aren't always on board with these new approaches.
And, some teachers might be hesitant to change too. It's understandable.
Yeah, it's like they've been doing things a certain way for a long time.
It's like trying to steer a giant ship in a new direction.
It takes time.
Exactly. It's not just about replacing the old textbooks with shiny new ones.
It's about a whole new mindset.
Right. So how do we start?
Yeah, how do we even begin to make such a big change?
Well, I think the first step is just raising awareness.
Getting people talking about it.
Yeah, talk to your colleagues, share this research with other teachers.
Even bring it up with the people in charge.
The more we talk about it, the more likely we are to see some real change.
So it's about sparking curiosity, getting people excited about these new possibilities.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment a little.
Like if you're a teacher, try out some of these new approaches in your classroom.
And if you're a learner, seek out resources that use these principles.
It's about being open to new things.
Exactly. Be a trailblazer. But of course, there will be some pushback.
Yeah, not everyone's going to be thrilled about changing things up.
That's where patience comes in. Change can be scary, especially when it challenges what we thought we knew. So approach those conversations with respect.
Really listen to people's concerns.
And try to show them the benefits of this new approach.
Because ultimately, it's about giving learners the tools they need to be successful.
Giving them the power to take control of their own learning.
Making language learning a fun and engaging experience.
Exactly. This has been a fascinating deep dive. We've really uncovered some important ideas about how we can improve language learning.
And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in making those changes happen.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep challenging the status quo. Until next time.